So the first item is the forward agenda.
Can we add the new briefing on the revocation of the community mandate to the board agenda?
We can do that.
Yeah.
I've just got a stall because the next item is community foundation and Gary's got a mouthful of milk at the moment. No. So next item, community foundation. So we'll pass over to Gary. Sorry, while Carol brings up the PowerPoint. Gary,
Yeah.
we'll finish with milk.
That's right. I'll have a copy. You mentioned it took longer on the forward agenda.
Well, can you say that? I was going to comment about USBs and
All right, thank you, Ben. Yeah, look, I brought this item back for further conversation with members. You will recall last year I presented early thoughts around how we can sort of look at benefit sharing or working in partnership actually with the renewable companies, as Dr. Pete pointed out. We have quite a few in our area. So just a quick recap, obviously we developed the community development strategy, which is very much about, looking at building capacity, creating places, creating communities and providing services and programs. So one of the big elements of that was doing less and communities doing more for themselves and being self-driven in that respect. And so looking at a community partnership model where council, renewables and community work together to deliver services and programs which is beneficial to them going forward. And with the 9 planning communities that we've set up in our community development strategy, that they're self-sustaining. As you know, we attended the Small Town Reinvention Conference last year. We sent community members to that, again, the support of some of the renewables in terms of the registration for that conference. So, as you are aware, there are quite a number of renewable projects that are occurring within our council area. Majority are at the pre-construction phase, so they're very much in the early planning or pre-planning stages. There's one under construction at the moment, Summerfield Bess, and we have Manum Solar and their BESS operating at this point in time. So as you can see, there are quite a number of projects, and we are definitely experiencing a lot of interest in our area. Geographically, we happen to be in amongst the transmission lines and the Tonkello substation and a number of other substations. So
Palmer's about to kick off construction, aren't they?
They have indicated that they will start construction about mid-year. They still do have a number of reserve matters under their planning consent that they need to resolve. The most significant one for us is the infrastructure scheme to support the use of local roads. So myself and Ben are still having a lot of conversations with not only Palmer, but a couple of the others in terms of their infrastructure requirements.
So whatever happened to the Cainton one?
K1
Just disappeared?
just disappeared, yeah.
It got sold a few times. Different.
Yeah, but no, it hasn't re-emerged.
No.
And that's the thing with these renewables, that one company does start and then the other one takes over. So the Kilo BESS was originally proposed by RES and now is a company called Iberdrola Australia, which is a Spanish company. So yes, we do see a change of ownership with some of these projects as well. So in terms of benefit sharing, so each of these companies are required to have a benefit sharing plan. Now, if you look at South Australia, there's no guidelines. So unfortunately, a lot of these companies operating in South Australia are then reliant on using interstate guidelines to set up their benefit sharing plans. It was interesting to note that with the new legislation, so a lot of these renewables were operating under the planning legislation here in South Australia. They now operate under the new Hydrogen and Renewable Energies Act here in South Australia. And that act does not speak to benefit sharing at all. Yet the Department for Energy and Mining on their website does talk about clear benefit sharing through social programs, support for local industry, employment, compensation or other economic benefits. So the website does speak to it, but the actual legislation doesn't. And as I said, no set guidelines. So as you can see on that screen, there are a number of interstate examples. I think it's worth noting New South Wales and Queensland in particular. New South Wales, has very strong principles and the rate at which these benefit sharing programs work. So the policy principles talk about standard practice, collaborative, transparent, community focused, proportionate, and delivering positive outcomes. In terms of the rates, solar is basically worked on the megawatt capacity of the infrastructure. So for solar, it's 850 per megawatt capacity. Wind is 1,050, and batteries work at 150 per approved megawatt hours. But that's if it's a standalone system only. So if a BESS is associated with solar or a wind farm, they're excluded from the benefit sharing. So that's the New South Wales model in terms of some of the key principles in theirs. In Queensland, it's very regulated through the planning system. And so a renewable company has to do a social impact assessment before they can get a community benefit agreement, before they can get prior planning approval. So theirs is very strict in the way they actually establish, and they probably use a similar rating capacity. The WA consultation last year had ranges for their costings. So that's interesting too, that they're working on that. The community benefit agreements that are in existence in Queensland are a legal binding document between proponent and the relevant council. And so it really ensures that the money that they receive is spent in the community. In that original proposal about collaborating the funds together is growing momentum. And so even interstate now, they're seeing the benefit of regional sharing rather than neighbourhood or local sharing. So these people from Community Power Agency are very much talking about project level versus regional level. All the renewables are talking about how distance from the footprint you get funding. So a resident who, let's use Tilt for example, a resident who obviously has a turbine gets a rent from having that turbine on their property. They currently offer a neighbourhood benefit. Neighbourhood benefit if you live in proximity but don't have a turbine. And now with their community benefit framework, which they're currently consulting on to the end of this month, they're proposing 4 streams. So in which one of those streams, if you live within 5 kilometres of the footprint, you get an energy subsidy for your electricity bill. They're also then offering other parts of their program, including community grants. So the concept that was presented last year was very much the idea that each of the individual renewables would have their own benefit sharing plan, but we would be encouraging them to make a contribution to a Mid-Murray fund. At the time, it was just a general fund. Now, with more conversations with Foundation Barossa with the idea of setting up a community foundation. The idea is to go into a Mid-Murray Community Benefit Fund, which is effectively an auspice fund under Foundation Barossa. So Foundation Barossa would basically then administer the funding on our behalf, and that excludes the need for us to establish a board and all the governing framework that goes with a foundation. Now, community foundation is very much about sharing benefit across the community. So the Barossa Foundation have been operating for a number of years, where they obviously collect funds from various sources and then redistribute it to the community. The Mayor and I met with them early last year with this concept. And then Natalie and I met with them just before Christmas, after they also spoke at the Small Town Reinvention Conference, where they very much talked about setting up a sub-fund effectively to allow councils like ourselves to have a fund without the administrative governance framework that goes with it. So the concept is therefore that, it sits in this benefit fund managed by Foundation Barossa, but we would have to have an advisory committee that would give advice to where funding should be spent on which projects, which is not dissimilar to what some of the renewables have already done. Summerfield BESS, who currently their grant application closed recently, have got a committee, which Toxic Peak is one of the representatives, who are advising on which projects should be funded. So it's very similar to what these renewables are currently doing. So the notion is therefore that from funding source, the idea is that these renewables will provide a contribution. Again, when I presented this earlier on, it was sort of maybe an emotional 10% contribution. Now, given my research into the benefit sharings that are occurring in the state, the way it operates in Queensland, for instance, it's up to 85% that goes to the council. So ultimately, the funding source can be open to other donation bequests and other contributions as well. The notion is, in terms of how the fund is managed, what Foundation Barossa have indicated to us is that they would 80% of funds received would ordinarily pass through back to the community, and then 20% would be invested into the trust fund. So that trust fund is then managed and invested by Foundation Barossa. Then there's an annual allocation of the 4% of the earnings going back towards the community as well, and they take a 2% administration fee to manage that fund on our behalf.
So who is Foundation Barossa?
So Foundation Barossa is a board of community representatives, and we'll
So
say
that's not tied in with like supermarket and all that?
No. No, not at all. No, it's a separate organisation totally.
Incorporated,
Yeah. So there's various foundations in Australia and in South Australia, and they are part of a broader organisational alliance. There's Foundation SA. There's other foundations.
Stand Like Stone.
Yes,
Yeah.
yep.
A few elected members came to something down in Hindmarsh or something with
Yeah.
me. So
There's multiple community foundations around, so they're just one of many. So, as I said, Mayor and I, when we met, the idea was whether we establish a Mid-Murray Foundation, which then would have to set up the whole governance framework to support that, or alternatively approach them as a way of auspicing the fund. The other key element, like I said, is that we would have to establish an advisory committee and somehow make that representative of each of the 9 planning areas to get that equity. That's one of the pros and cons that I'll go into. Committee assess and recommend projects and programs for annual funding, but the final decision is made by the board of the foundation. So there'll be an annual funding cycle where the committee reviews and then they'll be distributed. And obviously allows for a fairly transparent process. So it shifts the money from the renewables in their locality to the entire council area.
What's your view on them deciding who gets the money?
Okay, I'll go into that a bit more.
Good question.
Yeah. So this is just, Annabelle provided me with a 20-year plan just to show you, what the financial, element of this is. So the idea that there'll be an annual payment of around about 120,000 saved from all the renewable companies, each year. 80% I said is passed through, so that's automatically available through the community grants program. 20% gets invested, then you obviously get the earnings, and then you get the admin fee and the 4% distribution each year. So that builds up over time. So actually then, by 2045, you would have given the community 1.9 million just through the 80% flow through. But the investing the 20% gives you a further, 558,000 over the life of that 20 years. So most of these projects have a life cycle of 20 to 30 years. Tilt is 30 years. Most of the BESSs are 20 years. So once those projects are decommissioned, those community benefits end. So any programs that they were supporting effectively would end as well.
So the 120, that's locked in.
Well, this is just a model, so this is subject to negotiation with renewables as to what percentage they're prepared to provide. I've had positive conversations with two of the energy companies in terms of the value that they're prepared to contribute, with finer details still to be resolved around the foundation model. Iberdrola, the new kids on the block, are very open. They had their information session last week around their project, but they're very open to positive sharing with council. Because Tilt are in the process of finalising their consultation in their discussion paper, they flagged the interest of giving a portion to council, but they wanted to see what the community felt about it. Summerfield have already started theirs, so the question then, how do we go and retrofit potentially what they're doing now? So just very broadly, the benefits of a community foundation is obviously there's a strategic impact where we get collective funding, we can make more positive impact across the region. It's fairly transparent in terms of obviously having an independent board and governance and reporting requirements. It's fairly flexible and obviously has that regional equity about it. In terms of concerns, the advisory committee, the potential number of representatives would be hard to manage. We're talking about 9 community members, potentially having the renewables sitting on the committee, potentially having First Nations, and potentially even having elected member representation. So it could be unwieldy in terms of its size. So we may have to think, of having a non-representative committee, just simply having a committee to make recommendations. And obviously
The strategic committee, like one of those committees that we've already got.
potentially, yeah. A grants committee.
Can it be a voluntary thing? Because there's too many committees getting around where people get handouts.
Well, I said, as the mayor just said, I think if you use some of the existing committees, you could probably deal with it. In terms of decision making, yes, the question is, Barossa Foundation is the decision makers, so there is some loss of control of the funding allocation. So ultimately, the committee is making recommendations on projects that obviously community members are putting up. But ultimately it's the board of the foundation that will determine whether they receive funding. Not dissimilar to the council, when you consider community grant applications each year, you're getting a recommendation from the committee, but ultimately it's your decision as elected body. You're passing on that responsibility to the board of Barossa Foundations.
I'm fighting, but how do you get on this board? We'll say this does happen, and I was like, oh, I could go on the board. Could I sit on the board of the Barossa?
You
The
could.
foundation of course.
My understanding that
Is it
their board membership is open on a regular basis where they
Yeah.
call for nominations. So yes,
I noticed they think they're called specific ones, so if they need someone with a finance, they'll say this is what we're looking for,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
How big is the board?
I think it's about 7 members if I remember off their website. Yeah.
With their first potential affiliate.
Sorry.
With their first potential affiliate.
I think we're their first potential subsidised fund. Yeah, I mean auspice funds, sure, so yeah. But they are looking at doing that place-based funding. Yeah,
9 people on the board.
9.
Annabelle came to me because I went to it, like after the session we did in Adelaide, I was super keen because I could see it could be really great for our region.
Mm.
But every time I went and got further information, I actually went, this will never happen. We're never going to get these sorts of people wanting to do committees. It's such a big council region, blah, blah, blah. And then I've sort of spoken to her each time. I was like, I really want to do it, but I also don't want to be the runner of this. Like I've got too much on my plate. And then she'd heard about this subset. Actually, it was a guy that came from the US to talk to a community foundation. I think he talked about how these subsidiary type things worked, and,
Yeah.
and it just clicked. And she goes, "I can help you," you know. So this is where it sort of
Yeah.
came up.
So their board are very open to the concept. So yeah, they spoke, like I said, at the reinvention conference in Kapunda. So they had representatives of 3 foundations plus like the governing sort of organisation, and there's in WA one of the I think there's the Fremantle Foundation, and they offer these some place-based grants. And so these little communities are setting up their own benefit funds under that auspice of Fremantle.
And so where are they getting their money from?
So donations, philanthropic organisations, things like that, they don't necessarily have renewables. So yeah, there are hosts of foundations around the place, and so there is pros and cons with it. As I said, you know, as an alternative, if you don't have a foundation, you know, if this was to work with the renewables, you'll probably have to set up a separate account in council's finances and make sure that it's, you know, kept separate. And then therefore we use our current structure of using our grants committee to, you know, receive applications and then allocate the funding. Some of the renewables obviously want to have representation. And how do you separate their benefit sharing plan, which they're directly responsible for, versus the percentage they give to council, and then wanting to still have a say in where that goes as well? Because if it goes to the foundation, as I explained to one of the renewables, if it goes into this community foundation, they lose all control of where the money is spent, because effectively the foundation is responsible for that. So the goodwill is for them to say, well, and I'll just go back to a little slide here with the map, is the fact that we've got, you know, multiple renewables happening in the Tunkillo Palmer Manham area. And so, you know, those communities of benefit, you know, are receiving significant amount of funding over the next 5 to 10 years. And they acknowledge, these renewables acknowledge that, you know, once that investment happens beyond the 5 years, they're going to have to start thinking about how much further out they've got to start sharing their funding. Whereas this model gives them the opportunity to sort of support those other regions within our council that have no renewable companies. So Canberra, Sedan, Swan Reach, Blanchetown localities, you know, will receive funding through this. Again, the advantage of the foundation model is that this is a forever fund. So therefore that investment can continue beyond the renewables. And then if other people, philanthropic organisations wish to donate, they can to that foundation. I think that brought me to the end.
So who would have set up the terms of reference for the Ross Foundation, like,
I mean, in terms of the original members that established it, they would have written the terms of reference and what they were set up for. Yeah.
and do they have people presenting to them and say, I think you should, you know, spend the money on this, you know, like.
So the board,
Timbrang or something.
so the board obviously operate to decide where those funds are spent. And at the moment, they're offering scholarship programs, other similar grants to the community. So they, as a board, offer, so through the CEO's office, they would announce a grant or a program, and then community members would apply, and then the board will consider and adopt those recommendations. So that's how the Barossa Foundation itself works. But this is an auspiced fund, so hence we would need that advisory committee to make a recommendation to their board.
Otherwise, if you have an independent foundation, they could say, well, you know, that's a group, they could say, I think we should spend all our money on revegetation. And that could be just the main drive.
So again, I think that we're the trustee that we would be establishing between council and the foundation will set up the criteria to which the funding should go to, and the renewables would equally be a party to that criteria. So then we can say they want to they probably don't have an education arm, they might want to have an environmental arm, they might want to have an assets arm of the funding. Because if you look at, again, using Tilt, their four-pronged program, one is, let's just say, energy subsidy, one's a wellbeing program, one's education support program, and the fourth one is just a community grants program.
And now special Indigenous.
Yeah, yeah. And Summerfield, they've got criteria in their program. So as long as you meet the criteria, then the projects that meet that will get funding. So again, if we were to go down this path, we would be party to what those criteria would be and what programs would support. The notion is that, you know, with the 9 planning areas, that our new community action plans would be a major driver as to where we would allocate funding. So long as projects align with the community action plans, they would be supported for funding.
So questions, thoughts, concerns?
Sorry, I didn't mention, Ben. Yeah, so what I have drafted was a policy or position statement, because in the absence of any guidelines in South Australia, it's very hard for Ben and myself to have conversations with these renewables as to what we should expect, because they are saying, well, we're following New South Wales guidelines. Well, my read of the New South Wales guidelines is we're probably getting less than what we should be getting. And I say, even if we were, you know, Queensland again, some councils, they're getting up to 85% of the community benefit. So that's a starting point, almost. So having a policy or position statement will give us a bit more credence to have a conversation with the renewables as they set up their programs.
Georgia, did you have something? No?
Something that does interest me, Tony, is what are some of the projects that the Barossa Foundation has done, or Foundation Barossa, sorry?
Well, the ones I'm aware of is they've done some education, back to school, keeping kids in schools.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they have even helped out, I believe, Canberra Primary School with some of that back to school. Like once I told her our story about how, you know, because that was during the worst part of the drought. So yeah, she actually started helping in this area. Yeah. But they've got a lot of initiatives. They've got a homeless initiative. Like if you go there, they do an annual report, which is like quite thick.
I have to.
Yeah, it's crazy and exciting.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I think one of the concerns about that decision-making process.
Yeah.
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 So
I certainly hope it's a moot point and that we can get some legislation in over the next few years so that councils get rates.
Yes.
but we need to do something
Yeah,
in
for sure.
the short term.
And that was the other reason for the policy. is because we don't have that position. So I put it in the policies simply. And look, the renewable companies do acknowledge it, but we know that what we're getting is still far less than what they would be paying as rates. And again, I feel like we're getting far less than what the guidelines looking into state suggests we should be getting. Or community should be getting, should I say.
Yeah.
Well, it just shows this policy will show the companies as well, they were getting serious about
Yes.
the way they want this done.
Yes.
Yeah.
And like I said, two of the companies have been very open to contributing to a benefit program like this. Like I said, the fact that Tilt have at least flagged it in their discussion paper, they're all very conscious that their community of benefit is close to the footprint. When we drive around, Dave here has been driven around. When you go look at where Tunkillo Bess is and Harrogate Bess is, the community of benefit is predominantly little properties scattered around. So in reality, community of benefit is the town of Tunkillo. That is the true community of benefit. Now with Tilt, they're using a 5 kilometre footprint for their energy subsidy. Now, conflict of interest here, I have a family member there, but the notion is that why is it stopping at one house and the house next door doesn't get one?
Always.
That's not a community of benefit. That's just a rough line in the sand. So this program does allow us a bit of an opportunity to spread the money a bit more broader if they're going to be stringent on their criteria.
And also there's overlapping circles between these different providers as well, so there's people middle who could fight in all one. at the
Yes.
moment.
Correct.
Which is before that too.
But as I've alluded to now, I call it the golden triangle.
I mean, personally, I think this is worth exploring. Really, and
Sorry.
the only other thing that I'd be interested in, I don't know, they probably would never supply this information to us, the energy producers, is how much of their offer of community grant funding is actually taken up by the communities. They could be offering 250,000, but they only get $50,000 worth of applications. So I know that's not been our experience with our council community grants. It has varied how much, how much the total value of the application is. I just wonder whether there's a little bit of a cynical exercise going on in some parts where we'll put it out there, but we know we'll never get the request for that much.
I would imagine that the renewables have their reporting requirements as well as part of the annual report to show where the community benefit plans are going.
But this would clarify all that from a point of view as well.
So my intention is yet to bring a report back to council with the policy, with the idea that we would seek to have that policy or position statement endorsed by council, give us a bit more credentials in terms of having the negotiations with the renewables. And the report will also ask a question if elected members are interested in pursuing the foundation model.
I mean, I guess it'd always be in all the deed or whatever, deed of agreement or whatever that's developed, if we go down this path, there'd always be out clauses if they started not accepting a significant amount of our recommendations.
So the other thing that Annabelle did say, I'm sure at our meeting, Simona, but I know when Nat and I met, very much sort of suggesting that they can be the transition, so that they might be the initial board looking after the foundation funds, but say in 10 years' time, we might be mature enough to set up our own foundation board. So there might be interest in the community to say, okay, we'll set up a Mid-Murray Foundation. So that it's not stopping that opportunity getting down the track.
So on their website, Georgia, did it say that what's their running costs?
So they were going to charge us a small fee.
Yes,
Yeah.
so they do a 2% admin charge, and they would do that with all the fund contribution that they receive, because they basically have a CEO and office to run, and they basically then have a board which has finance, governance and other skills on it. And they would play also, I think, in terms of one of their financial costs as well.
Well, I thought 2% was quite reasonable.
Yeah.
You know, if you got $2,000, if you've got 100 grand in there, so
Would it be worthwhile if we invite Annabelle to the council meeting to discuss, so a few of us have met her down at the, on the foundation sort of things, a year ago, but, yeah, just so, you know, it's not just a picture on a board document.
what's the plan, Gary? When are you thinking
Well,
about?
like I said, my thoughts was to bring a report back to council with the process of seating with negotiating with a trustee with the foundation board and with notion to adopt the policy around the benefit sharing.
All right. Anything else that you want Gary to consider as part of that process? Be comfortable with going down that path? Obviously, council will make any decisions at a council meeting. Any Gary? Dave, tree management policy.
That was a bit dramatic, Ben.
Had a cat down forest produces policy.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
So tree policy, basically the revamp of the tree policy is given a little bit more clarity, a little bit more detail. It's been a compilation of quite a few other councils put together. There's a couple of elements in there which I have taken out, which I'll make comment on. But I suppose what we're looking at doing is obviously setting up how we look at our trimming process, our planning process, relocation requests, and obviously removals. The current draft policy as it is now is probably still a work in progress, but it also aligns the fact that we won't do trimming where people have solar panels, signage, leaf litter, if you complain about leaf litter dropping down, which are all very, very common requests. And if there's, they put shade on someone's front yard, that's just the specifics of the tree. The current issue we normally get roped into is that someone wants an arborist report on a tree. Any tree could cost you anywhere between $1,500 to about $2.5 grand per tree. And if you look at how many trees we've got, not just in our area, but right across the community land and room front. So what we're looking at doing is bring it back to an officer assessment so that the officer can make a general risk assessment and then put it into a specific program. So we're not as reactionary as what we always have been. And that risk assessment will be basically a visual initially, and then maybe a program pushing into the tree to see the health of the tree. Also looking at our area, which will be in the public, which will be in the guidelines. We do arborist reports on our common areas like Marion Reserve, Caribbean Parks and so forth. So we do those ones for public safety, but we can't do their relocation. And the amount of requests we get to do those sort of things are phenomenal and we blow budget a week. So what we're looking at doing is obviously just trying to pull that back, have more of a structured assessment where our arborists will go in and have a look at the major ones in the public areas, specific public areas, and then we have our own staff make those general recommendations and then put it into a works program. That's one thing we do lack is a works program because everything is reactionary. And if you start looking at our rural roads are getting encroached by vegetation and regrowth. And the regrowth will actually come back with about 4 or 5 years. That's how quick it grows back. And plant replacement's probably leaning towards that, what you adopted today on a tree trimmer. But looking at getting into a program where we do more of what works we dictate rather than the works that have been drawn us by the public. Also looking at developing or reviewing the guidelines so that obviously we are abiding by SA Water, SA Power Networks and our own swim schemes, because obviously root intrusion and infiltration has a massive issue with those public utilities. Just a couple of considerations and ramifications I'll just point out from the tree policy is when you start looking at, like we're talking about plant allocations, like going out and doing plantings. We have done some planting before, but it's very limited because of the stretch of resources. So obviously you need to actually have a budget or reallocation of services for that, because we don't do a lot of tree replanting in streets. Ideally, streetscapes are great. At the previous council, when we did a reseal, we looked at the guttering, we looked at the footpath, we looked at the street trees. So we actually did this whole project. Unfortunately, we just don't have the capability here yet. So there will be ramifications on planning. There was an element within it which I've taken out, which is vermin control. Basically, when a request comes in, white ants always live in the street tree and go to the house, never the other way around. So just be very, very mindful to pull back on that process, that because of the amount of number of trees we get, everyone sort of says, oh, well, the white ants came from there and you're going to get rid of your tree. Well, if I did that, then you'd have no trees. There's also something I've left in there for consideration, which will actually have some ramifications on cost, is when there's damage from tree roots to property. We do highlight that it's going to be done by an engineered report by the property owner. But if I had to do that, I'd be doing Palmer Streetscape right now, because Palmer Streetscape has a very aggressive root system. And basically, you'd have to be doing a root barrier along 40 footpaths along the Palmer. So you've got to give consideration of those things as well. So that clauses 6.2 and 6.33. So you give a bit of feedback on those. Another one of concern, also which you have issues with, is 6.32, which is health concerns. If someone writes in and says, I've got a health concern, please get rid of a tree. Well, I can get a health certificate tomorrow if I wanted to. So there's some things that have been included into this policy that you may not want in there. And we can invite feedback on that. Like I said, the annual tree trimming program, we refer to it in the policy. We have a very limited annual street tree program. Ideally, we should be doing about 70% of our works on our rural road, about 30% in our towns by doing a monthly visitation. So go to Tunkillo, then go to Palmer, then go to there, rather than doing this tree here this week, someone brings up this tree over here. We've got to be able to align our resources to do it better. And that's something that hopefully we'll be able to escalate from this. So, yeah, the idea is obviously a program, because our patrol grade operators keep saying, trees are in the way, I can't do it. And eventually the trees will encroach on the road and we won't be able to grade a road in some cases. So I'll invite any bit of feedback and I can provide these points to you in an email after this, after the meeting, just to highlight some aspects, just to get some feedback from council on the direction of the tree management policy.
I was pleased to see the bit about vandalism and actually having that in there. Of course, that's a really good thing. I believe that tree protection legislation is only Greater Adelaide, so it doesn't extend out into our region. And I just didn't know whether there's any role that council has to play in protecting significant trees on the private lane.
So,
Well, because the state government only cares about trees that are within the Greater Adelaide area, where there's tree protection, preservation doesn't extend out to us, we're outside that boundary.
Yeah.
So in regional areas, there's no tree protection whatsoever.
The only protection is by the Native Vegetation Act.
Yes, yeah, and
Crown lands.
Yeah, correct.
and I mean, I have gone through a process with council where, because we've lost several significant, huge native trees in our region, in our area, within view of our house in the last few years. And we did go through the native, they were very helpful, I would say native vegetation, they actually keeping me informed. I went through council, but then they were keeping me informed of what action they were taking, and they were taking some action, which is really good. But I just wasn't sure whether we feel that's the limit of our role in terms of our treescape. Has anybody got the golden deed? Money?
Yeah.
so your question is whether we should be doing more.
Yeah, whether there's a role for council to play in tree preservation for the region.
Not sure that unsustainable or potentially unsustainable council. I think it would be something through the LGA or even the landscape board to see if they think it's a problem.
Yeah.
And we'd be very last resort.
From a council perspective, I said you're right. Yeah, the regulated significant tree legislation only applies to Metropolitan Adelaide. The Native Vegetation Act is the only rule mechanism that we have. The only alternative is if you were to deem a tree to be of heritage value, then you can have it listed as a local heritage place. So that would require us to do a local heritage.
Which council's been, went through a few years ago. didn't it?
Correct, yes.
Yeah.
Whether trees were included in that, I don't know. Might have been just buildings. But yes, you could list a tree if it had heritage value. And that's the only other way to protect a significant tree in our district.
So, Andy, the challenge we have is there's many things we'd like to play in,
Oh, I know.
and that is something that has a lot of merit, and we should, but how do we choose? And probably not in our strategic plan at the moment, but doesn't mean it can't be. And that, please don't interpret that as it's not important.
No, no.
It's just no, so it'd be
Yeah.
it's the decision of council really.
Again, a lot of councils have done a lot of work in the island effect. So trees have significant value in terms of reducing heat island effect. And just because we are a regional council doesn't mean we don't have heat island effect, as we do. On a day like today specifically. So a lot of councils have done a lot of planning and research around understanding their heat island and therefore looking at ways to then, increase vegetation cover as a means of reducing that.
Yep.
Dave, what policies been considered, and the LGA were having a draft policy? I'm just because there's a risk perspective to this, and we've seen issues in Adelaide and Adelaide Hills, and have we considered those guidance, their policies, their changes in this draft policy?
The knowledge of what they were doing out of the ramifications of the deaths through trees hasn't been forthcoming out of the LGA at present. It is still sitting with, I think it's still sitting with their lawyers. So basically
Well, it's a guidance document. There was going to be a draft.
yeah. So what we're looking at doing is how we just manage our trees as it is now. And I suppose if there is any guidance by the LGA when that comes out, that will dictate a change in this policy.
What about Adelaide Hills and Adelaide? Because I know they did some work around that. Have those policies been considered as part of
Adelaide Hills was, yes.
Yeah.
Adelaide Hills was.
And not Adelaide?
Not Adelaide, no.
So maybe just as an iteration, if we can get, and obviously different circumstances, regional versus metro, but the risk of a tree falling on a road or, in a park, is presented by us. So if we could just give that some thought.
So what about insurance, like council insurance? Because in Cadell, when we wanted to get insurance on the caravan park, one proviso was that we need to supply an ARPA's report every 6 months to keep that insurance valid because of the tree.
Yeah, obviously we can't do that for every tree in our region.
Yeah.
But we have, risk areas that we do that.
Yeah, we get 12 monthly inspections on the caravan parks and a couple of the local reserves, like the high priority reserves. And that's a significant cost. Out of that, they used to come out and say priority 1's priority 2 cuttings. Well, 1 year I think our priority 1 cuttings was $30,000. And priority 2's could have been, a couple $100,000. So we brought that back so that it just is a recommendation for that year, so it doesn't actually highlight the risk within, but then the risk will be picked up the following year through the inspections. So we do that through our own, and we highlight what risks we have, and then we deal with those risks. So that's pretty much where a lot of our tree trimming processes go, and then that's at the detriment of the rest of the trees in our road network.
So there's no indication of when the LGA is going to provide us that.
No. I know Heather's made some inquiries quite a few times, and nothing's coming out of it.
Any other thoughts, comments? So Dave, you'll provide a summary of the questions that you have to elected members, and they can provide some feedback with the report to come back to council at the appropriate time.
I'll just say one thing with the numbering, once you get to 6, your numbering's a little bit skewed in the draft copy. We've got 5.1 and 5.2 and 6 and 6 points and 7s.
That happens at 4:55 before all the weekend, don't we?
I was checking if anyone was awake.
Otherwise,
And Dave, just 2.4, just to have it referred to a generic strategic plan rather than a specific one.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Dave. On to the next one, which is your road policy, disposal of roads.
Basically looking at disposal of roads and the processes. So what we've looked at what we've looked at doing is, for administration point of view, it's very onerous to do. All aspects are. There's a lot of consultation involved. I suppose you're finding that now with land sales and road closures and land, so forth. So the process now sets out it's either through a road lease with your option one, a road permit option one, or a lease through a 5-year lease option two, or acquisition as an option three. All take a fair bit of time and a lot of public consultation. The process now is that we're looking at doing an application fee because we get that many ad hoc requests about it, and then like I said, it's very onerous to commence, and then entering into an agreement to proceed, which will then go into community consultation and obviously whether we outsource that cost. Basically, what we're looking at doing is just ratifying how we go about it, and the policy sets out, I suppose, the process. There are still quite a few requests for people who have lodged requests about buying land or portions of land, which initially means you've got to go out and undertake a survey straight away, and then go out and do a land valuation. So obviously, they were costs that were being incurred by council in the past without any commitment by the owner. So now we're looking at putting in a bit of a commitment back to that person. And if the public consultation does go either way and that person doesn't get that, I suppose the option of land that they made the request on, then that's transferred to the next person based on an agreement. So that's the process we're looking at doing. It also takes into consideration the current policy, which is about roads fronting the river, making sure that we don't let those ones go, which is an existing policy to council.
So Dave, this has been ongoing. It came to a meeting and then we made some changes and then came back to a meeting. So and one was around the process.
Yep.
So you're comfortable where you've landed on a process, you got some advice on this, and you know, how do we get to where we are given the challenges we've had in the past?
The process really was basically all staff orientated and administratively controlled. So what we're looking at doing is obviously having an application fee, very similar to what we do when we have naming of places, public places. Someone ring up and say, I don't like that road name and I want to change the road name. You say, okay, there's a $780 fee, and they go, okay. So having an application fee is trying to make sure there's a serious request so that someone can actually then move on. And I'm sort of thinking about 500 as a base fee. Council may consider more. And that's the fee for us to even commence the process. And then we then go to then enter into an agreement to proceed, so that person then locks in everything that's going to be done. So there's a surveyor, a land valuation, and basically in the policy we sort of said it's a land value to the adjacent land, because with the Brenda Park one, we went and got a land value to, you know, when we looked at that 5 years ago, but looking at what the land value might be, just so at least we've got a bit of an idea. So the land's selling at $500 an acre next to it, that's probably what we anticipate the road value would go for. There's obviously other considerations of native engineer and whether we're actually not allowed to let it go. But it's sort of putting it in a place where there's a better procedure for us to move forward.
And what were the challenges beforehand? So you know how there was a live case and then we put the policy and then we said, no, we need to review it. So what was the sticking points and how has this improved? And what process have you gone to improve this? Like, have we taken legal advice? Have we considered other policies?
The policy was written by one of our lawyers, so to get it all right. The process we had before was someone would write to council, we're going to do a report to council, then we're going to go do public consultation, we're going to write another report back to council, all because of an ad hoc request. So what we're looking at doing now is saying, okay, well, you pay an application fee.
Yeah.
Now you've got into an agreement because you're going to take on all these costs and we're not paying a fee.
Yeah.
So theoretically, then, if someone is serious about buying a block of land or a portion of land, which might be just a strip of footpath, then they enter into an agreement and saying, right, here's what they've got to do. So then it's first up, it's a serious a request, and then it's also then that we're not out of pocket, and I also have the ability to outsource it.
Yeah, so it deals with the resourcing issue, because that was my another thing.
Yeah.
If we had 15 requests,
Yeah.
we couldn't actually facilitate it.
We can't, yeah, we just couldn't facilitate. But I suppose the intent of it, just with the land sales, about how many reports you're going to do just on the land sales and revocation. So, not there's a revocation, but the other element is consultation. The consultation has to go with all the immediate adjacent landowners. And if there's a landowner, and generally these sort of requests coming out of a neighbourhood dispute. And we're dealing with a neighbourhood dispute. So we're going to make sure that we're not trying to fix that problem. The issue is that if it's a serious request to buy a portion of land or a road, that we are doing it for the right reasons. And that full consultation gets taken into consideration.
So Dave, you're comfortable? So you're comfortable that the issues we had prior have been captured and we've been able to come up with a process that's going to work both from to get rid of make sure they're serious.
Yep.
And for us to deal with it as smoothly as possible, efficiently as possible, internally.
Yeah, and I suppose that'll come out with like the agreement to proceed, what that looks like, and how that actually then formulates into this policy to make sure that we've locked away all the costs and the opportunity of outsourcing this work to do it.
Sorry, Kirsty.
No, just from memory, there was, when this came up a long time ago, there was a couple of inquiries already had been made, but work was stopped while this was being developed. And I think one of the other elected members, not here now, did ask how we were dealing with those requests. Have those people been notified that we've sort of stopped this and there's another option now? I know that's very operational, but yeah, these people are obviously sitting in limbo a little bit.
Yeah, we've communicated to everyone. It hasn't been for a while, to be honest.
Okay,
We haven't
yeah.
heard back from them for a while.
Okay.
But we told them that we were developing the policy
Okay, yeah.
and that we'd come back to them once the policy.
Yep.
Yeah, basically we put a report to council at that time, and we put a moratorium on all the requests at the time, and just said that we weren't progressing to the policy, and obviously the policy's taken some time to develop. And I suppose once I try the policy and go through the process once, I'll know if there's any anomalies. But I think the way it's been written and the way the lawyers have come back with it, it's probably locked out, because that gives a couple of options, and it just depends on which option they want to go with.
So how did the Local Government Act come across 42 years?
Don't know, basically it's for section 221 permit is for 21 years with a right of renewal for 21 years. That's how they come up for 42.
It's a random number. Any questions to Dave or?
Just a dumb one. East Front Road section that's closed. That's adjacent to River Murray. So there will never come a point then where we'll say that portion of East Front Road is never going to be safe to use. So we want to keep it as a road because it's adjacent to the River Murray.
I suppose looking at the existing policy and looking at the definition and the scope of that policy, that may need a bit of redefinition. Because I suppose the intent of that was looking at, I suppose if you look at Blanchetown, there's road reserves between shacks where people use those to get water lines through and so forth. And people make inquiries to make those there as a road reserve to a house block. So I think that's the intent of that policy and we've had one just recently at Water Flat where someone wanted to buy into a road reserve to expand post flood. They want to build a bigger house, so they want to buy on the road reserve. So I must have been back to that policy and said, well, you can't do it.
Thanks, Dave. Last item is the sorry if I just find my thing. It's ALGA motions. So we have the ability to go through a process to propose motions to the General Assembly in usually June, July. So we just wanted to have a discussion about that and see if there's any ideas or people want us to progress that.
Yes. I don't know if we're going to put one up. We certainly haven't in my time, but I just thought I'd post it out early so that we can have a think about it.
Don't feel like you have to.
Yeah.
We're just giving you the opportunity to do it. And to be honest,
It's a little while before closing.
Yeah.
so.
Simone and I have had questions around, you know, what actually goes and where they go and stuff like that, the merit in doing it. It's quite theatrical, the debate of motions.
I've got a request for more road funding.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's always one of those.
And we're not, to start somewhere.
Yeah. And what happens is, like, if our council puts in a motion and there's 10, they'll just pick the best one that they'll put up, and all of the rest will still be listed so that they know how much support there is for that.
You don't have to make a decision today, but if you do want to, we just want to give you the opportunity.
Yep.
That's the end of the briefing. Is there any questions? No? Thank you. We'll finish up there.